Lily treated Luke like trash over something as small as tea. At the inn connected to the Adventurer Guild, she did what she always did. She mocked his tea, his skills, and the way he lived. Then she reminded him that he should be grateful she even allowed him to stay in her party. In public, Lily looked perfect. She had a gentle image that made people in the capital praise her as kind and graceful. Luke knew that side was fake. In private, she enjoyed looking down on him. She was his childhood friend and his battle partner. Because of that, many adventurers envied him. They thought he was lucky. Luke could only smile bitterly whenever he heard it. That night, Lily declared that their next quest would be the Ice Maze, an A-rank dungeon. Luke tried to stop her at once. Their last B-rank job had already pushed him to the edge. During the Flame Lizard quest, he had survived only by standing in front as the shield, while Lily attacked safely from behind. His defensive stance blocked the damage, but it did not block the heat. He had felt like he was being roasted alive, while she called it an easy win. Their party style never changed. Luke, a shield user, took every hit. Lily, a sage, stayed behind him and finished the enemy with magic. She called it teamwork. Luke knew it was just a reckless setup that dumped all the pain onto him. The gap between them made it worse. Luke was only C rank. Lily was already A rank. Instead of making her careful, that gap only fed her arrogance. When Luke begged her to rethink the ice maze, she threw hot tea in his face. After that came the same humiliation she always forced on him. She made him admit that she was the leader, stronger than him, and better at judging danger. Luke gave her the answers she wanted, because arguing only made things worse. Then she ordered him to show his skill board. The panel shows a C-rank shield user with no contributions and the skill defensive stance. Lily laughed at all of it. Luke still could not understand why his contribution never rose. He had completed quests and risked his life many times, yet the number never changed. Lily said that only proved he was useless. Then she made him thank her for keeping him in the party. He thanked her. Then she made him apologize for being a burden. He apologized. Only then did she look satisfied. She ordered him out and told him to return to his own room. Luke stepped into the hall and let out a quiet breath. A long time ago, Lily had not been like this. But after they became adventurers, her insults and violence slowly became normal, and Luke had gotten used to it. The Ice Maze was an A-rank dungeon. The thought sat heavy in his chest, but he forced himself to believe he could survive if he just endured one more time. The Ice Maze was exactly what its name suggested. The walls, floor, and ceiling were covered in cloudy ice. Lily walked ahead with a magic map. It recorded every route they took. She owned almost all the useful gear in the party and rarely let Luke touch any of it. Not long after, a group of Yetis appeared. Luke moved to the front at once. He raised his wooden shield and used defensive stance. At the same time, the lure spell Lily had cast pulled the monsters toward him alone. 3 Yetis rushed him together. Their blows were heavy enough to crush a body, but defensive stance turned him into a wall as long as he kept his shield raised. Every hit still shook his nerves. Luke endured until the monsters slowed down. Then Lily fired lightning. The Yetis dropped. That became the pattern as they pushed deeper. Luke took the hits. Lily finished the weakened monsters. To Luke's surprise, his defense still held even in an A-rank dungeon. For a moment, he started to think they might actually clear the mission without disaster. But the deeper they went, the harsher the cold became. Lily shivered and complained, while Luke handled the cold much better, which only annoyed her more. As they walked, Luke thought about warm stew. Even small wishes like that depended on Lily's mood, because she controlled everything. She kept the quest rewards, the money from monster materials, and all party funds. She claimed Luke could not manage money. Whenever he questioned it, she exploded. That was why Luke still wore plain clothes and carried a cheap wooden shield. They barely looked like members of the same party. Then the path widened. Ahead of them was a huge dome-shaped chamber. It was the boss room. Lily started to say it should have been empty, but both of them froze before she could finish. A giant black beast stood in the center. It had 3 heads. Luke recognized it right away. Cerberus, an S-rank monster. It should never have been there. Luke reacted at once. He told Lily they had to retreat and report this to the guild. Cerberus had not noticed them yet. If they left quietly, they still had a chance. Lily refused. Her pride took over. She convinced herself this was her chance to prove she deserved S rank. She fired lightning at the beast. The spell struck one of its heads. It did nothing. All 6 eyes turned toward them. Luke told her to run. Before he could say more, pain shot through his back. Lily had kicked him forward into the room and screamed at him to do his job. Luke had no choice. He raised his shield and activated defensive stance. The lure spell caught Cerberus, and the monster focused fully on him. Then fire swallowed him. There was no damage, but the heat was far worse than anything he had felt. Even so, he held firm. If he fell, both of them would die. Behind him, Lily fired spell after spell. When the flames finally stopped, Cerberus was still completely unharmed. Her strongest magic had done nothing. Luke shouted that he would keep holding the line if she waited for the beast to tire out. He still believed there had to be some way for both of them to survive. That was when Lily showed him the truth. To her, he had never been a partner. He was only a shield, a decoy, something disposable. She told him to die buying time for her escape. Then she ran. Luke kept calling her name while Cerberus drowned him in fire again and again. He held defensive stance with everything he had, waiting for some sign that she would come back. No answer ever came. When the flames cleared, Lily was gone. He kept his shield raised and endured. That was all he had ever been allowed to do. Lily handled the attacking. He had never been taught anything else, and she had never let him try. Cerberus slammed a claw down. The impact cracked the frozen floor under Luke's feet, but defensive stance still held. A part of him still wanted to believe Lily might return. That hope died quickly. For years, she had insulted him, hit him, and treated him like less than human. Even then, he had still believed that when real danger came, they would face it together. That belief was gone now. Cerberus lunged again. One head clamped its jaws around Luke's neck and blasted fire point blank. Luke barely felt anything anymore. The pain had gone dull. His heart had gone numb. At that point, endless defense was not survival. It was just waiting to die a little later. So Luke made a choice. He lowered his shield. Then he canceled defensive stance. He closed his eyes and accepted what should have been the end. If he ever got another life, he wanted to live freely. Cerberus struck. A sharp metallic sound filled the room. Luke opened his eyes in shock. The monster had hit him hard enough to fling him across the chamber, then smashed him again before he hit the floor. Still, there was no damage, no crushing pain. Luke stared at himself in disbelief. His skill board had not changed. He still had only defensive stance. Cerberus blasted him with fire again. Still, nothing. Luke did not understand it, but one thing became clear. If he could survive that, then standing still was no longer his only option. He looked at the shield in his hand. Maybe he did not need defensive stance anymore to endure attacks. The flames cleared. Cerberus glared at him, confused that he was still alive. Luke stepped forward. Cerberus charged. Luke pulled back his arm and swung his shield with all his strength. He had never attacked a monster before. Every battle in his life had been one-sided, but now there was no one behind him, no one to obey. So he hit back. His shield crashed into Cerberus's face with a deafening blast. The huge black body flew across the room and slammed into the far wall. Cerberus let out one broken cry. Then it stopped moving. Luke stood frozen. He had beaten an S-rank monster with a single strike. He still had no idea what had changed inside him, but the result was in front of him. He tried to take a step toward the corpse to collect materials. Then, all the strength left his body. Luke collapsed. When Luke opened his eyes, Lily was standing over him. One foot was on his chest. Even that rough wake-up felt familiar. His mind cleared fast. Lily had not returned for him. She had returned for the loot. After escaping, she had checked the magic map and noticed the boss mark had disappeared. That told her Cerberus was dead. So she came back, used a collection bag, and took every rare material for herself. She was already planning how to spend the money on better equipment. Not for Luke, only for herself. Luke looked around. Cerberus's body was gone. That alone told him everything. Then he asked her one question. If another monster like that appeared in the future, what would she do? Her answer came instantly. She said she would throw him away again and run. In her mind, his life was worth less than hers. He should have been grateful for the chance to die for her. That was the moment something inside Luke finally snapped. He thanked her for everything up to that day. Then he told her it was over. He was leaving the party. He would never adventure with her again. Lily froze. She could not believe he had said it. To her, Luke was someone who obeyed, no matter how badly she treated him. She thought he was only acting out. Luke made it clear that he meant every word. From that moment on, they were strangers. She tried to hit him. Luke dodged. She swung again and again, but every punch missed. The truth was simple. Luke had always been able to avoid her attacks. He just never did before, because dealing with her rage afterward felt even worse. Now that reason was gone. Breathing hard, Lily pulled a stone from her pouch. It was a transfer stone, a rare one-use item that could teleport its owner to a place they had already visited. Most adventurers never even saw one. Luke understood at once why she had kept it hidden. If disaster came, she had always planned to save only herself. Then she made her threat. If he did not take back his words and beg, she would leave him there. She would also remove the night vision spell. Without light, a map, or help, he would never get out of the maze alive. Luke still refused. So Lily vanished, and the world around him went black. Luke stood alone in the darkness and gave a dry laugh. Being abandoned twice on the same day felt absurd. Even so, he did not feel as broken as before. This time, at least, everything was clear. He no longer had to pretend that Lily cared about him. Still, the darkness was real. He could not even see his own hand. Luke moved slowly, using the icy wall as a guide. He had no idea whether he was heading toward the exit or deeper into the maze. Somewhere far off, yetis growled and scraped at the frozen walls. He tried to stay calm. He told himself he had beaten Cerberus, so maybe he could handle a yeti too. But once he remembered how drained he was after that fight, even that weak confidence started to fade. Then he saw it. A small red light floated in the darkness ahead. It could have been a trap, but staying still would not save him, so he moved toward it. When Luke reached it, he saw something impossible. A tiny girl floated inside the red glow. She was small enough to sit in his palm. She wore petal-like red clothes, her deep red hair tied back, with thin wings on her back, and for a moment she looked asleep. As far as he knew, fairies had vanished long ago. Then, the tiny girl opened her eyes. She introduced herself as Mars, a fire fairy. Her voice slipped straight into his mind like a whisper. She asked him to free her. Luke hesitated. Touching a fire fairy sounded dangerous. She said she would not burn him. She also said she could hear the thoughts of nearby living beings. Even so, her request was simple. She wanted him to free her from the glowing prison around her. Luke agreed. He gently held her tiny body in both hands and slowly drew her out of the red light. The glow vanished at once. Mars thanked him and asked his name. Luke introduced himself. Then Mars told him she would grant his wish. Before he could think, she told him to close his eyes. He did. A few seconds later, warmth pressed against his eyelids. When Luke opened them again, the ice maze was gone. He was standing outside the Adventurer Guild in the capital. He stared in silence. Yes, he had wanted to escape the dungeon, but this was not the place he wanted to return to. If he had been given a choice, he would have preferred some faraway town where he could quietly start over. Instead, he had been sent back to the very city tied to his old life. Then the guild doors opened. A long-haired man stepped out first with one arm around Lily's shoulders. Lily held a handkerchief to her face and acted like a grieving saint. The timing could not have been worse. Luke stood before the guild, trying to understand why Mars brought him there at that exact moment. Mars only looked pleased with herself. She landed on his shoulder and explained no one else could see her or hear her. To everyone around him, it would look like he was talking to empty space. That became a problem right away. The long-haired man beside Lily looked at Luke with suspicion. Lily looked at him like she had seen a ghost, but that shock lasted only a moment. Her face changed at once, and she stepped back into her usual act. She pretended to be relieved that he was alive. She pretended to be heartbroken over what happened in the dungeon. Then, when she noticed him reacting to Mars, she quickly added another lie. She made it sound like the battle had damaged his mind. The man beside her backed her story at once, saying Lily did everything she could, and Luke only survived because of the magic she cast on him before the fight. Luke tried to answer. Lily cut him off. She grabbed his hand hard enough to hurt, and quietly warned him to stay silent unless he wanted even more trouble. By then, people were already gathering. Adventurers and guild staff spilled outside and formed a ring around them. Within moments, Luke and Lily were standing in the middle of a wall of staring faces. Luke told her to let go. She released his hand and changed roles again. Now she became the sorrowful girl grieving for her brave partner. She told the crowd that Luke had heroically ordered her to escape and had chosen to stay behind and fight alone so she could live. It was a smooth lie, and the crowd accepted it. Some praised Luke's sacrifice. Others said he had only survived because of Lily's support magic. A few still mocked him, but the result stayed the same. Almost no one believed him over her. That was how things always worked. Luke was a C-rank orphan. Lily was an A-rank adventurer and the daughter of a marquis. Most people had already decided whose words mattered before either of them finished speaking. Mars quietly felt sorry for him. Luke answered that feeling with calm resolve. He said he was done staying silent. Then he looked straight at Lily and ended it in front of everyone. He told her never to speak to him again and never to come near him again. He did not care what excuse she had spread around the guild. From that point on, they were no longer party members. They were strangers. Mars looked delighted. Lily responded with fresh tears. She told everyone Luke's mind was damaged and begged them to be gentle. The more he denied her story, the more unstable he would look. This time, Luke did not care. He stepped past her and headed for the guild entrance. He planned to file the withdrawal periods and end the party properly. Lily grabbed his arm again. Now she acted like a loyal companion who could not bear to lose someone precious. She spoke as if they were meant to stay together. She called him irreplaceable. The crowd loved it. Some laughed. Others praised her devotion. Luke felt only disgust. If he had really been irreplaceable to her, she never would have left him to die. The truth was simple. She did not want to lose the servant she had controlled for years. So Luke gave her one final answer. He told her to treat the next partner better, not with pretty words and false concern, but with real kindness. For just a moment, her mask slipped. A sharp look flashed through her eyes. It vanished almost instantly. Luke shook her off and pushed through the crowd. Someone hit him from the side. Someone else grabbed his shoulder. He ignored all of it and kept walking toward the guild. Behind him, Lily started protesting. Then the crowd suddenly fell apart on its own. Two men were walking through the opening. One was an older noble with a cane. The other was a young attendant with twin sabers at his waist. The moment Lily saw the older man, her face changed. Her father had arrived. Belia von Rudens was Lily's father. Luke had only met the Marquis once before. It was years ago, just before he and Lily left for the capital to join the Adventurer Guild. Back then, Luke was still living in the orphanage. He often spent time alone in an old shed, making toys from hay and scratching pictures into the wall with sharp stones. That was where Lily had started visiting him. He did not even know she was a noble until the day they left. The Marquis had come to see his daughter off. He had spoken warmly to her, then turned to Luke and asked him to look after Lily. For an orphan boy, that small bit of trust had felt important. Now that same man stood in front of him at the worst possible time. The Marquis asked what was happening. Lily answered before Luke could. She said Luke was confused and trying to leave her party, then asked her father to talk sense into him. The Marquis demanded a full explanation. Lily gave him a perfect lie. She She claimed entering the ice maze was Luke's idea. She said she warned him, but he ignored her, charged at a strong enemy, and still failed even with her support magic. She also claimed he forced the transfer stone on her and chose to stay behind. Then she said the battle damaged his mind, yet she still wanted to remain his partner. Mars crossed her tiny arms and quietly pointed out how badly the story clashed with the truth. Then she offered to solve the problem with fire. Luke refused at once. He did not want the situation getting even worse. The Marquis then turned to Luke and reminded him of the promise from long ago. Luke said he remembered it well. He had stayed beside Lily all this time and had protected her through many dangers without letting her suffer serious harm. The Marquis said he was grateful for that. Then his tone changed. He said that if Lily's story was true, then Luke had acted recklessly and still been forgiven. In that case, Luke should understand how beautiful her wish to stay with him was. Luke answered plainly, "It would have been a beautiful story if it were true." The Marquis asked if Luke was accusing his daughter of lying. Luke said yes. Almost everything she had said was false. The crowd reacted in shock. Even so, Luke did not step back. He had spent too many years swallowing pain and forcing polite smiles. That road had led only to betrayal. He was done pretending. The Marquis warned him that if his accusation was false, then he would be insulting both Lily and the Rudens family. Luke said he did not care. So, the Marquis ordered him to speak. Luke told the truth. He said Lily chose the A-rank dungeon, just like every quest before it, and never let him decide. In the ice maze, they found Cerberus before it saw them, and Luke told her they had to retreat. Lily refused, attacked first, and exposed them. As always, Luke took the front while she cast from behind, but when her magic failed, she ran and left him. After he somehow defeated Cerberus alone, she came back only to take the monster materials. The noise around them rose immediately. Lily kept throwing in wounded cries and false outrage, but Luke ignored her. The Marquis found the story impossible to accept. Cerberus was far too strong. He turned to the young man beside him, Carlo, and asked if such a thing could really happen. Carlo answered calmly. Cerberus was an S-rank monster. An S-rank adventurer might defeat one alone. An A-rank party would need at least 5 skilled members working together. Anyone weaker than that had almost no chance. The Marquis asked Luke for his rank. Luke answered that he was only C-rank. That was enough for the Marquis. Carlo said it was impossible for a C-rank adventurer to defeat Cerberus alone. The Marquis took that as proof Luke had to be lying. Luke still did not bend. He admitted that even he did not fully understand how he had won, but he said it had happened all the same. The Marquis looked at Luke with open disbelief. Luke could see that the man did not believe him. Even so, he stayed firm. He was about to explain more about the fight when Lily suddenly asked to leave. She said she felt sick and wanted to return to the inn. Something about her had been strange for a while. Ever since Luke mentioned Cerberus, she had grown restless. She kept glancing around and touching her forehead, and her usual control had started slipping. The Marquis allowed her to go. Before she could move, Carlo stopped her. He asked to inspect her adventurer pouch. Lily clutched it to her chest and refused. She tried to hide behind talk of privacy, but that excuse failed immediately. An adventurer pouch was only meant to store approved items and monster materials. Carlo then asked her directly if Cerberus materials were inside. All color left her face. The Marquis shouted at Carlo for suspecting his daughter, but Carlo calmly explained himself. Luke had said Lily returned to collect Cerberus materials. If that was true, the pouch would prove it. If it was false, the pouch would clear her name. The Marquis thought for a moment. Then he agreed. He ordered Lily to hand it over. She backed away step by step, but Carlo kept walking toward her. In the end, she had no choice. She gave him the pouch. It took only moments. Carlo opened it and pulled out a fresh Cerberus fang. He said it had clearly been collected recently. The monster's scent was still strong. Lily panicked. She claimed someone had given it to her earlier. Then, in her panic, she demanded to know who Carlo even was, as if he were some random guard speaking above his place. That made everything worse. The Marquis said he trusted Carlo completely. Then he turned back to Lily and asked her one last time if she still meant to deny everything. She did. Luke watched her sink to the ground and hide her face. He felt no pity. He knew too well what it was like to speak and never be believed. Even so, he told her to stop resisting and confess. Lily looked up at him with open hatred. Then Mars moved. The tiny fairy flew across Luke's sight and lightly touched Lily's forehead. Everything changed at once. Lily began shouting her real thoughts without holding anything back. She screamed that none of this was her fault. She raged that Luke had dared to defy her. She complained that she had almost walked away with free S-rank materials before everything was ruined. She openly asked why she should not be allowed to use a weaker adventurer as a sacrifice. She said no one would care if Luke died. She admitted she had abandoned him on purpose and had even canceled his night vision before leaving. She called him her servant. She admitted to bullying him. She almost said more about his class before suddenly covering her own mouth. The crowd looked horrified. The Marquis looked frozen. Even Lily seemed shocked by her own words. Luke understood at once that Mars had done something. The fairy returned to his shoulder, looking quietly amused. Lily tried to deny what she had just said, but her father cut her off. His voice had turned cold. He told her to stop talking. Then he turned to Luke. For the first time, there was no doubt left in his face, only shame. He admitted that his daughter had treated Luke terribly. Luke said it no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was that he would never adventure with her again. The Marquis agreed. Then he looked down at Lily and said she needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. He declared that she was returning to the family territory with him at once. In his eyes, she was no longer fit to be an adventurer. Lily shouted that he had no right to decide that for her. He ignored her completely. Then he dragged her to her feet and led her away. For once, she had nothing left. Luke sat in the guild cafeteria and felt eyes on him from every side. Whispers moved through the room with the same story. A beautiful young woman praised by everyone in the capital. And behind that image, a cruel liar who abandoned her own party member in a dungeon. The shock had spread through the guild in no time. Luke had left the crowd as soon as he could and come to the cafeteria for one reason. Carlo had asked to meet him. Mars stood on Luke's hand and bounced lightly while speaking into his mind. She said it had been a rough day. Then he asked again what she had done to Lily. Mars gave a simple answer. As a fairy, she could read hearts and loosen what people tried to hide. She had only forced Lily to speak honestly for a while. Luke thanked her. That single act had broken the chains around his life faster than he ever could have done alone. Mars then flew up to his shoulder. Carlo was coming. He sat down across from Luke and lowered his head in apology for everything Lily had done. Luke told him it was not his fault. The damage was real, but Luke had no intention of living inside it forever. Carlo then brought up the part that bothered him most. Luke had really defeated Cerberus, so why was he still only C rank? Luke opened his skill board and showed him. It looked almost the same as always. Shield user, C rank. Carlo stared at it, then asked a strange question. Since when had Luke been wearing a broken watch? Luke froze. Carlo explained that the watch itself might be faulty. Then he placed a proper guild-issued adventurer watch on the table. It was made for a shield user. Luke suddenly remembered something. When he first joined the guild, Lily had handled most of his registration herself and told him to wait back at the inn. The watch he had worn ever since had come through her. He took the old one off and put the new one on. Then he opened his skill board again. The display changed completely. His class was still shield user. His rank was still C, but the skill list was no longer the same. Defensive stance was gone. In its place were skills like resistance to lightning, paralysis, heat, and cold, along with auto guard, magic defense, lure, shield bash, and night vision. Luke could only stare. Carlo explained what had happened. Higher skills often replaced lower ones. Defensive stance had evolved into auto guard. That was why Luke had survived Cerberus. Auto guard had already taken over without him realizing it. The fight started to make sense. Shield bash explained how his blow had launched Cerberus. Night vision explained what had likely awakened near the end of the dungeon. Luke asked why he had still been unable to see in the ice maze. Carlo said the answer was probably timing. The skill must have awakened too late, just before Luke escaped. Even with all those skills, Luke's contribution was still 0. Carlo said that made no sense. Then he took Luke to the guild counter and asked the receptionist to check the records tied to Luke's account. What they found stunned him. According to the guild records, Luke had never completed a single quest. Every job ended the same way. He had supposedly retired from the quest after being removed from the party. Luke had no memory of that ever happening. Carlo explained it immediately. Party leaders had the authority to remove members. A removed member got no contribution, no rank growth, and no credit. It was a dirty trick. But Lily had clearly been doing it to Luke again and again. That was the answer. She had stolen every bit of progress he should have earned. She had kept him weak on Pirir, trapped him at C rank, and convinced him he never improved at all. The broken watch had hidden his real growth. Her own rise through the ranks had likely been built in part on what she took from him. Luke absorbed it with surprising calm. More than anything, he was relieved to finally understand. Carlo apologized again. Luke stopped him. There was no point letting the past decide everything now. Lily was gone. Then, before leaving, he gave Luke a heavy pouch filled with gold coins. It was compensation from the Marquis. Luke tried to refuse, but Carlo insisted. After a few exchanges, Luke accepted it. That money mattered. After Carlo left, Luke stood in front of the quest board and looked at the requests hanging there. Mars rested on his shoulder. When he asked what she planned to do next, she answered in her usual carefree way. She would stay with him until she got bored. That almost made Luke laugh. Then he looked back at the board. This was the real beginning. The sky was clear. It was a simple C-rank gathering job. He had come to collect fragrant gentian, a sweet-smelling flower used in potions. The place was called Dragon's Backbone. The receptionist had told him an old local story before he left. Long ago, people said the ridge had once been the body of a giant dragon that slowly became part of the land. She had laughed right after saying it, but Luke still remembered it. Mars yawned on his shoulder and wondered why he had picked such a boring quest. Luke explained that quest choices depended on contribution. His contribution was still 0, so for now, he could only accept the same beginner work. Mars then asked why he was speaking out loud instead of using his thoughts. Luke told her it did not matter. No one else was around. He offered to let her help gather flowers. Mars refused immediately. A moment later, she slipped into his chest pocket and fell asleep. Then, he got to work. By the time he finished, he had gathered around 30 fragrant gentians. The request only needed 20, but he had gotten carried away. To his own surprise, he had enjoyed it. He had never done peaceful work like this with Lily. Back then, every quest had been pressure, danger, and pain. This moved at his own pace. Mars woke when he finished and softly praised him. He could not remember the last time anyone had thanked him after a job well done. A little later, something strange caught his eye near the path. Part of the ground had sunk under a layer of weeds. At first, it looked like nothing more than a hole. Then Luke stepped closer and saw stairs leading down. It was a hidden dungeon entrance. He had barely realized that when a scream echoed up from below. It was human. Luke and Mars looked at each other. Then he went in at once. The stairs went deep underground. Soon the stairway ended in a narrow tunnel. He stopped for only a moment. The cave was huge. Holes opened across the walls above and below, with bridges linking them into a tangled web. The whole place looked like a nest built into a mountain. Mars noticed the danger before he fully did. Goblins. They were everywhere. When Luke narrowed his eyes, he saw small green faces peeking out from hole after hole. Each one held a bow. They had not noticed him yet, but more and more of them were crawling onto the bridges. Luke immediately told Mars to hide. She slipped into his pocket. Then he searched the cavern again and found the source of the scream. At the very bottom, someone was trapped at a dead end. A girl, and standing in front of her was something much larger than the others. A goblin king. It was clearly the ruler of the nest. Luke understood the situation. The goblins had likely let the girl wander deep inside before closing the trap around her. They were smarter than most people gave them credit for. He warned Mars again not to reveal herself. Then, he activated Monster Lure. Every goblin in sight turned toward him. More of them poured onto the bridges. Their eyes gleamed as they raised their bows. Luke shouted to draw all attention to himself. A storm of arrows answered him. By reflex, he almost thought of defensive stance, but that skill was gone now. This was auto guard. The arrows slammed into his protection and did nothing. Still, blocking attacks was not enough. The girl was still trapped below, and the Goblin King had barely reacted. It was too far away. Even with death right in front of her, she shouted for him to run. That decided everything. Luke grabbed the bridge rail and jumped. He did not hesitate. He aimed straight for the Goblin King far below. He praised the girl in his heart. Someone who could still think of another person at a time like this did not deserve to die there. He drove it down with shield bash. The impact exploded through the cavern. The Goblin King was smashed straight into the ground. Luke landed without a scratch. The Goblin King was not. Its huge body had been driven deep into the floor. Only its rough green head still remained above the cracked stone. Luke ignored the materials. The girl came first. He turned toward her and finally got a proper look. Luke took a step toward her and nearly stumbled. His body suddenly felt heavy. It was not as bad as after Cerberus, but the strength in his limbs had clearly dropped. Mars quietly told him he was running low on magic. That only confused him more. Luke had thought Shield Bash was just a strong hit with a shield. He had also believed only mage classes had to worry about magic. Luke put the question aside. Most of the goblins had already fled after the Goblin King fell. He stopped in front of the girl and gently asked if she was all right. It sounded like she was both fine and not fine at the same time. At least she was conscious. So he told her they had to leave. He held out his hand. She did not take it. She stayed frozen and shook even harder. Luke tried to calm her. He told her the Goblin King was gone now. That only made her panic more. The monster was not the problem. She urgently told him to run. Luke first thought another enemy was hiding nearby. Then she finally said the real reason. The whole place was about to explode. Her face was full of fear, but there was no sign of a lie. Luke believed her at once. He grabbed her arm and told her they would escape together. She shook him off and tried to push him away with clumsy, harsh words. There was a serious reason behind it. So instead of backing away, he crouched in front of her and smiled as calmly as he could. That almost made her scream. Then she explained. She was a powder mage. Luke had never heard of that class before. Lily had kept him trapped inside a tiny world for so long. She had only let him learn what was useful to her, but that thought had to wait. Luke asked whether the explosion could be disarmed like a normal bomb. She said normal bombs could be handled. This could not. What had been activated was self-destruct. Luke did not know the full details of a powder mage's skills. The girl finally broke down and explained everything through tears. She had used the skill because she believed she had to kill the monsters no matter what. But then Luke had appeared and saved her instead. Now she did not want a kind stranger to be dragged into her end. Luke listened quietly. The more she spoke, the more certain he became of one thing. She was brave. Luke spoke to Mars in his thoughts. He told her goodbye. He told her to run before she got caught in the blast. Mars refused at once. She asked what he planned to do, and when Luke answered that he would stay, she calmly said she would stay too. Then she added that Luke probably would not die. His defense should still hold. Luke asked about the girl. Mars's answer was grim. The explosive magic had already wrapped itself around the girl's body. Mars did not think there was any way to stop what was coming. Luke closed his eyes for a moment. Then he decided. Even if he could not save a life, that did not mean there was nothing left to do. He reached out. The girl panicked again and begged him to run. Instead, Luke gently pulled her into his arms. He knew it might be awkward, but if holding her could lessen even a little of the fear and loneliness in that moment, then it was worth it. At first, she could barely understand what he had done. Then she admitted she did not hate it. She admitted she had been terrified and had felt horribly alone, and she cried even harder because now there was no time left for him to escape. Luke told her not to worry. He had never planned to run. Then she whispered one final apology. The blast came right after. White light swallowed everything. Even with his eyes shut, Luke could still see the brightness through his eyelids. He held the girl as tightly as he could. Then the floor collapsed beneath them. The light slowly faded. Luke opened his eyes in the middle of the fall and loosened his grip just enough to check the girl. She was alive. She was staring back at him with a face even more shocked than before. Relief hit him so hard that he almost laughed. He wanted to tell her he was glad that she was still here, but he was too tired to say all of it. Then the girl burst into tears. Luke pulled her close again while they kept falling into the darkness below. He hoped AutoGuard would handle the impact. A heavy crash slammed into his back. The world went black. A worried voice kept reaching Luke through the dark. Another voice followed it. It told him he had done enough and that he should wake up because the girl had been crying the whole time. It was Mars. Luke slowly opened his eyes. The first thing he saw was the orange-haired girl leaning over him with tears all over her face. Before his thoughts fully returned, he found himself telling her not to cry and that everything was all right now. That only made her cry harder. She buried her face in his chest and shook with relief. Then his memory came back. Both of them were still alive. That alone made him feel better. About 15 minutes later, the girl finally calmed down. She thanked him again and called him her savior. Luke only smiled awkwardly. She checked his body again and again, then took his hand and looked up at him with a serious face. She told him he had to value his own life more. Luke almost laughed at that. She had been the one ready to blow herself up, but she answered that without self-destruct, she had believed the Goblin King would never die. Once they both settled down, they tried to understand where they were. Luke looked up and saw a hole that seemed to go on forever. Even with night vision, he could not see the top. The girl checked her magic map. It still showed Goblin Nest, lowest floor, but their position marker was gone. That meant the fall had taken them somewhere the map no longer recognized. Then she noticed a side tunnel. It was the only path forward, so they took it. As they walked, Luke learned her name. It was Piri. He said it was unusual. She admitted people often said it sounded like a bird call. Luke found that funny enough to laugh. For the first time since waking up, Piri smiled too. A little later, she asked the same question Luke had been wondering about. How had they survived? Luke first wondered if Mars had said survival was impossible. Mars corrected him at once. She had only said it looked bad. Luke accepted that and checked his skill board instead. 2 new skills had appeared: Fall Nullification, Defense Grant. Luke understood the first one. The second one was the mystery. Piri leaned in, saw the board, and reacted as if she had found something impossible. A C-rank adventurer with 0 contribution was not supposed to have that many skills. Then she dug through her large pack and pulled out a thick skill dictionary. Piri explained that the guild already knew the names of many skills that appeared on skill boards. But even if 2 people learned the same skill, the result could still differ. One person's fire spell might make a small flame. Another person's might become something far larger and hotter. The board did not decide everything. It only helped the owner recognize what their body had already learned and call it up properly. At last, she found the page she wanted: Defense Grant. It was listed as a basic enchantment skill that gave about 1/10 of the user's defense to a target. That had to be how Piri survived. There was one problem. Shield users were not supposed to learn enchantment skills at all. Even Piri knew that. She looked at the page, looked at him, and finally concluded that he was probably just absurdly talented. Still, it was better than no answer at all. The deeper they went, the more Luke realized something. Piri talked a lot. She talked when the path sloped upward. She talked when it dipped down again, but her voice never felt annoying. It felt warm. She explained that the large pack on her back belonged to her father. He had once been an adventurer too. That made it more than luggage. It was a keepsake. Luke offered to carry it for her. She refused at once. Then she explained why. A material collection bag could only store monster materials and specially treated items. It could not hold normal things. That was why she carried the heavy pack herself. Luke listened carefully. So much ordinary adventurer knowledge had been kept from him for years that even simple explanations felt new. Mars stayed asleep in his chest pocket the whole time. At one point, Luke quietly wished Mars and Piri could talk to each other. Mars heard that thought, answered that she did not make new friends as a rule, and went right back to sleep. After a while, the rough cave walls changed. Smooth stone pillars rose around them. Somewhere nearby, water dripped. Mixed in with that sound was something else, breathing. Luke stopped. He told Piri to get some distance from him. Luke did not explain much. He only activated monster lure. Then the shapes appeared. 3 crystal lizards. They were A-rank monsters. The 3 rushed him at once. They struck his body and bounced off. One bit his arm. Another latched onto his leg. A third climbed all the way up and bit at his head. Luke felt no pain at all. Piri looked horrified. Luke noticed something strange. The crystals on their backs were badly scratched, as if something else had already been tearing at them before this. He considered using Shield Bash. Then he stopped himself. Every time he used that skill, it drained him badly. He asked Piri whether she could make a blast small enough not to damage the cave. She could. A moment later, red light gathered in her hands and formed a smooth egg-shaped bomb with a pin at the top. She called it Egg Bomb and warned him that once the pin came out, it would explode in 3 seconds. Luke thanked her, took it, and pulled the pin immediately. Luke covered his chest pocket with one hand so Mars would stay hidden, then let the bomb explode right against his own body. The blast filled the stone forest with light and flying dust. The lizards were gone from his body. Piri dropped to the floor in shock and panic. Then she rushed over and checked him all over again. There was no damage. Luke only said the cave had gotten dusty. That somehow made her even more upset. She told him he was impossible. Luke gave an awkward apology for being unreasonable. From there, their teamwork settled into a strange but effective pattern. When hard monsters came at Luke, he drew them in and held them there. Piri used Egg Bomb, rock scorpions, stone snakes. The deeper parts of the cave were full of sturdy monsters that liked close combat. After a while, he noticed that Piri looked strangely cheerful. When he pointed it out, she became embarrassed and said she had simply gotten carried away because the adventure was fun. Luke admitted the same thing. He asked about her own skill board. Piri brightened at once and happily showed it to him. She was a B-rank powder mage with a little over 2,000 contribution points. Her known skills were Night Vision, Egg Bomb, Bomb Disarm, and Self-Destruct. Then she narrowed her eyes on him. She could already tell he thought 4 skills looked a little sparse. Luke denied it, but badly. Piri explained that for a B-rank adventurer, that number was normal. Even skilled people usually stayed well below 10. Then he raised another concern. If skills usually took so much time, why had his been appearing so quickly? Piri answered honestly, because he was ridiculous. That answer did not reassure Luke very much, so he opened his board again and found something even stranger. Monster lure was changing. An arrow had appeared beside it, pointing to an evolved skill. Delicious. They stared at the word in silence. Then both of them reached the same conclusion. Luke had spent the last part of the dungeon getting bitten by one monster after another. Now, apparently, he had evolved from drawing monsters in to actually looking tasty to them. Piri burst into laughter and told him he was incredibly popular. Luke could only laugh with her. The deeper Luke and Piri went, the more purple crystal filled the cave. Monsters still appeared often. If anything, Delicious made it easier for a while. The monsters no longer circled and waited. They rushed Luke on instinct, bit down, and stayed there. After another wave of crystal lizards exploded off his body, Luke hurried to her side. Her breathing had gone rough. She tried to smile, but the strain was obvious. Repeatedly creating egg bombs was wearing her down. Luke ended the plan immediately. First, he canceled Delicious. Then he used Defense Grant on Piri. If that spell had carried her through self-destruct, then normal monsters should not be able to hurt her much at all. His new plan was simple. Stop fighting. Keep moving. For a while, it worked. The sight would have looked ridiculous to any normal adventurer. Piri hurried ahead. Luke followed with one crystal lizard hanging from his head and 3 more chasing them through the narrow tunnel. He kept telling her not to worry about him and to watch her footing. Then Piri suddenly found an opening ahead. The tunnel widened into a vast chamber filled with purple crystal. Luke looked up and heard a low sound from far above. It felt like wind. Piri brightened at once. If wind could reach this place, then there might be some path to the surface. Luke wanted to feel the same hope, but the sound came from so high up that the problem only looked bigger. At that point, Mars finally woke up. She peeked out, saw the crystal lizard still biting Luke's head, and cheerfully asked if he had found himself a new hat. Luke ignored her. Then Piri called him over to the edge of the chamber. She had found a clear patch in the crystal floor. Unlike the rest, it had no scratches, and the inside could be seen clearly. Deep below the surface, Luke made out something pale and huge. It looked like bone. More than that, it looked like the bones of a giant hand. He remembered the story about Dragon's backbone, the one about a dead dragon so enormous that its body had become part of the land itself. Maybe it had never been a joke. If this really was the remains of an ancient dragon, then the discovery alone could shake history. Then the crystal lizard on Luke's head screamed and fled. That was when the air changed. A heavy beat of wings slammed through the chamber. A second later, something landed on the crystal floor with a brutal impact. Luke turned and saw it. A dragon. It was enormous. Its wings were broad, and its silver scales looked like blades. Mars quietly confirmed the worst part. It was one of the extinct S-rank dragons. Piri immediately backed away. Luke stepped forward and raised his shield. He had no idea whether AutoGuard would hold against a dragon like this. He only had one choice. He activated Delicious. The dragon's eyes widened at once. Its whole body trembled, and the blade-like scales along its neck rustled together. Mars tapped him from inside his pocket and warned that if he tempted it that much, the dragon would not be able to hold back any longer. Luke did not care. The dragon lowered its head and slowly came closer. Luke braced for an attack. Instead, the dragon pressed its forehead into him. A harsh scraping noise filled the chamber. The blade-like scales rubbed against Luke's body again and again. If AutoGuard had not been there, he would have been sliced apart on the spot. But no damage came, only that awful sound. Piri nearly cried out. Luke told her he was still fine, though even he was starting to wonder how much longer this strange moment would last. The dragon kept pushing him backward until his back touched the wall. With crystal pillars on both sides and the dragon in front of him, he could not even swing his shield. Then Mars explained this was not an attack. The dragon liked him. Luke looked closer. The creature's eyes were closed. A few times it even licked him. There was no hatred in it at all. Mars read its heart and told him the rest. The dragon had been alone for a very long time. It had tried to get close to other monsters before, but the blade-like scales covering its body always cut them by accident. They would panic and run. The scratches on the crystal lizards suddenly made sense. This dragon had never meant to hurt them. It had only wanted company. Mars also revealed something else. Before Luke activated Delicious, the dragon had already noticed him. It had been holding itself back on purpose because it did not want to hurt him by mistake. That surprised Luke more than anything. Luke asked Mars, could she carry his thoughts to a monster the same way she spoke to him? She could. So Luke asked her to tell the dragon. It was allowed to lean on him as much as it wanted. A little later, Luke was running for his life. At least, that was how it looked. His footsteps pounded across the crystal floor. Behind him came the heavy steps of the dragon. Piri shouted for him not to slow down, or he would get caught. Then Luke tripped. He hit the floor, and the dragon's front leg came down over him at once. Piri happily declared him the loser. That was when the truth of the scene became clear. They were playing. The dragon rubbed its head against Luke again and again, clearly delighted with the result. Luke asked whether the dragon had a name. Mars checked and found none. She told the dragon that Luke was about to give it one. The dragon stared at him with pure hope. Luke thought for a moment and made his choice. He named it Kuel. He looked up the long crystal shaft above them and asked Kuel to carry them out. Luke and Piri sat on Kuel's back as it climbed higher and higher. Then he saw a faint light far above. It was moonlight. They were close. Then the truth came into view. The gap was nowhere near large enough for a person. Luke thought for only a moment and asked Piri if she still had enough strength left. She did. But she also pointed out that egg bomb would not work here. It was made not to damage terrain. Luke already knew that. What they needed now was not a careful blast. They needed a ridiculous one. So, with real guilt, he grabbed her shoulders and asked her to use self-destruct again. Piri understood at once. A little later, she climbed onto the crystal ceiling and clung there, while Luke and Kuel moved down to a safer distance. He signaled to her. Then the world exploded. Kuel twisted through the falling debris with surprising grace. Soon, an orange shape appeared among the falling pieces. Luke reached out and caught Piri cleanly. She was alive. More than that, she was grinning and making a proud little sign with her fingers. It worked. Above them, the night sky finally spread open. After so long underground, even ordinary ground felt comforting. Kuel settled nearby and looked strangely downcast. Piri quickly pointed out the problem. Taking a dragon back to the capital would cause chaos. Some adventurers would attack out of fear. Luke still made his choice. He told Kuel to come with them. For a second, the dragon only stared at him in shock. Then Mars quietly admitted that she had not translated Luke's words in the simplest way. She had made it sound more like a vow to stay together forever and never part. Luke could only sigh. Kuel, however, was thrilled. It rubbed against him again and again with enough force to fill the hilltop with harsh, metallic noise. Luke let it happen. He quickly formed a safer plan. There was an abandoned village not far from the capital. It was quiet, far from any dungeon, and rarely visited. Mars and Kuel could wait there while he went to the guild first and tried to make arrangements. Mars agreed to watch Kuel. Kuel was clearly unhappy about even a short separation, but Luke stroked its head and silently promised he would do everything he could. Piri watched all of this with an amused smile. She asked whether he was truly serious. He was. Then he looked straight at her and asked Piri to join his party. Piri smiled beautifully. Then she politely refused. The capital had many powerful groups besides the Adventurer Guild. One of them was the Hybris Church. Piri showed Luke a silver pendant shaped like a leaf. That was proof of her faith. Then she explained, believers of the Hybris Church were not allowed to form adventuring parties with outsiders. That was their rule. Piri admitted if things were different, she would have wanted to join him. Luke believed her, so he did not push. He only told her he would walk her back to the capital. They left Mars and Kuel at the abandoned village and returned together. But before they reached the main gate, Piri stopped. She said it would cause trouble if other believers saw her with him, so they parted there, and Luke went to the guild alone. It was early morning when he arrived. The guild hall was quiet. Behind the counter, Kate had her face down and was clearly asleep. The moment Luke called out to her, she jolted awake and acted as if nothing had happened. Then she slipped back into her sleepy tone and asked whether he had gathered plenty of fragrant gentian. Luke admitted that he had failed the quest completely. Kate found it hard to believe he had failed a simple gathering quest. Luke explained the truth. On the way back from Dragon's Backbone, he had found a hidden goblin nest, fallen into an unknown lower dungeon, fought through crystal lizards and other monsters, and barely escaped. Kate smiled kindly at first. It was obvious she did not believe him, so Luke placed a crystal from his material bag on the counter. That changed everything. Kate grabbed it at once, held it to the light, and recognized it as a first-rate crystal lizard crystal. The outer surface was scratched, but the inside was clear and pure. He told her that in the hidden dungeon he had befriended an extinct dragon, and since its home was destroyed, he wanted to travel with it from now on. Kate stared at him, as if he had finally lost his mind. She said that if she heard a story like that from anyone else, she would assume they were trying to trick her, but Luke pressed the point. He asked whether she would believe him after seeing the dragon with her own eyes. That made her hesitate. At last, she said yes. Still, believing him and approving something like that were two different things. She had no authority to allow it by herself. All she could do was help persuade the people who funded and influenced the guild. If about 1/3 of them agreed, then there might be a path forward. Luke was grateful. He was just about to head back and bring Kuehl over when Kate suddenly grabbed his collar and yanked him under the counter. Then she ordered him to stay hidden. A moment later, the sound of heels approached. Kate's whole tone changed. The lazy warmth vanished from it. She formally greeted the woman who had arrived and named her at the same time, Sisti, the leader of the Hybris Church. Luke went still under the counter. Then he heard the woman speak. She had come for the same reason as the day before. She wanted to know whether the boy who defeated Cerberus had returned. Kate told her no, and she left. Later, she told Luke to wait at a place called Roman Tavern. It was safer there because believers of the Hybris Church were not allowed inside drinking places, so Luke sat alone with a glass of grape juice. About an hour later, Kate finally arrived. She apologized for the wait, sat down, and immediately ordered a full table of food without even checking the menu. Salad, strange seafood, and a bright cocktail mixed with slime all appeared one after another. She even claimed slime was good for beauty. Luke tried to pull the talk back to the church. Kate teased him a little longer, then finally got serious. She told him that Sisti wanted him because he had become valuable. A C-rank adventurer rumored to have defeated Cerberus alone was exactly the kind of talent the church would want to secure quickly. Luke said he had no interest in joining any religious group. Kate warned him that his feelings would not matter. The Hybris Church would still try to pull him in by force if needed. Then Luke asked why a religious group wanted adventurers so badly. Kate answered with one word: money. According to her, believers had to hand over their quest rewards. Materials were also gathered under church control and sold through the most profitable routes. But it was only the start. Then she explained something called fake parties. Luke had never heard the term before. Kate said B-rank adventurers and above received a monthly payment from the guild. The amount depended on contribution, but there was one condition. If they failed to clear even one quest during that month, they got nothing. Fake parties abused that rule. The guild treated a party as a group that fought and cleared quests together. But in fake parties, not everyone actually went out. In extreme cases, only one person did the real work, while several others stayed behind and still received a share of the contribution and pay. Luke understood the result immediately. People who did almost nothing could still live off the work of others. Kate said the Hybris Church used that system on a huge scale. The church registered all believers as adventurers, even the old and the young, because the guild refused to deny anyone that chance. The church used the guild's kindness to form fake parties around a few real members and take guild money. Luke asked why the guild allowed it. Kate said it was hard to prove who truly joined a quest, and some guild leaders were believers too. She also said the church was rumored to punish anyone who tried to leave, sometimes brutally. Most believers were likely ordinary people, but all of them followed the leader. Luke thought of Piri at once. Kate was still talking when Luke emptied his glass and stood up. He said he had remembered something important. Then he left the tavern and headed straight for the church. Luke did not know how much of Kate's story was true. The fraud sounded believable. The part about brutal punishment was harder to accept. But when he arrived at the Hybris Church on the western edge of the capital, that doubt started to fade. The building was huge and polished, with a silver leaf-shaped symbol shining above it so brightly it hurt his eyes. Sacred words were carved above the heavy doors. Luke ignored all of it. Then he pushed open the doors and entered. Inside was a chapel. A goddess statue stood at the far end under hanging lights. Many believers filled the room. Some looked shocked that he had entered at all, as if the doors had been locked. But Luke saw only one thing: Piri. She was tied up in front of the statue. Fresh injuries covered her body. Near her stood several men and women holding whips and clubs. The room exploded into confusion the moment Luke stepped in. Piri weakly tried to tell him it was not what it looked like. Before she could finish, someone shouted for the others to stop him. Believers rose from the benches. Some looked terrified. Some looked desperate. Luke had once lived in a smaller version of that himself, but he had no softness left for this. He told them to move. The first believer who grabbed him was thrown back by autoguard. Another swung a club at his head, only for the weapon to shatter on impact. More bodies rushed in. No one could stop him. Luke reached Piri and lifted her into his arms. Even then, she still tried to call it a ritual. Luke apologized instead. He said his eyes had been useless. He should have seen the signs earlier. He never should have let her leave that day. At that, the believers began defending themselves. They said Piri had tried to leave the church. They claimed they had only been forcing her to take back her words before divine punishment could fall on her. They called it judgment and necessary. Luke rejected all of it. He said that any justice which needed a crowd to beat a helpless girl was worthless. Then he quietly cast defense grant on Piri. She looked up at him through tears and asked, why had he come at all? To her, they were supposed to be strangers. Luke told her they were nothing like strangers. She was an important friend. Back then, facing Cerberus, he had decided that if he survived, he would become the kind of person who protected the people who mattered. Now, he was finally acting on that choice. He told Piri they were leaving. She answered through tears. Luke turned toward the exit. Then a calm female voice cut through the whole room. The leader of the Hybris church stood in the doorway. It was Sisti. Luke knew her voice at once. It was the same voice he had heard that morning from under the guild counter. The moment she appeared, Piri's grip on his jacket tightened. Her body started shaking even harder in his arms. At first glance, Sisti's smile looked calm and warm. Some people might even have mistaken it for kindness. Luke did not. He had spent too many years around fake, gentle faces. There was no warmth in her smile at all. Luke told her to move. To his surprise, she stepped aside without resistance. He stayed wary and walked past her with Piri in his arms. They made it outside, without anyone stopping them. Then Sisti spoke. She said there was one thing Piri still needed to hear. Her mother's debt to the church was still there. Piri could leave if she wished, but divine punishment would surely follow. Luke understood at once. That was why Sisti had stepped aside so easily. She did not need chains if fear could do the same work. Luke immediately said he would pay the debt himself. Maybe not all at once, but he would pay every coin. He told her to leave Piri's mother alone. Piri weakly tried to object. Then all strength left her body. She went limp in his arms. Luke checked her breathing. She had only fainted. Then he glared at Sisti. Sisti calmly said the debt was not owed to people. It was owed to God. According to her, Piri's mother had once suffered from an incurable illness, and Sisti's prayers had healed it completely. Kate had already told Luke the rumors about her. She was a saint, a healer so abnormal that even hopeless illness disappeared in front of her, so that part was probably true. Now Luke understood the price. Piri had been pulled into the church because her mother had been saved. Luke asked what divine punishment really meant. Sisti answered, without shame. If a daughter forgot her duty to God, then the disease God had once taken away could return. Luke asked if that was really divine punishment, or simply her magic. Sisti only smiled and said that all of her magic was God's will. Luke understood enough. She could heal, and she could likely do the opposite too. That was how the threat worked. Then Sisti let something else slip. She already knew about Luke and Lily. She had heard that he had been bullied and crushed by his childhood friend for years. Even so, she found him sturdier than expected. Luke told her clearly that if she touched Piri's mother, he would never forgive her. He would expose the church's fraud inside the guild. He would tear the whole group down if he had to. Sisti denied everything with a smile. Luke brought up the Goblin King. He asked if she had already collected the quest reward for it. She said yes. She calmly claimed that a 9-person party had defeated the Goblin King together. She even named herself as one of the members. Luke already knew that much. Kate had shown him the record before he came. Luke could not hold back his anger anymore. He shouted that Piri had risked her life alone for that quest. She had been ready to blow herself apart just to bring that monster down. The church had only stolen the result afterward. Sisti's eyes turned colder. She said the argument would go nowhere. Luke clearly knew something, and she clearly would never admit it. So, there was no point wasting time. Then she offered a way out. Usually, when someone tried to leave the church, that person had to undergo something called God's trial. But this time, she would make a special exception. Luke could take the trial in Piri's place. Luke asked, if he accepted, would Piri be freed? Would her mother be safe? Sisti answered yes. Luke accepted on the spot. Luke climbed the tight spiral stairs with Piri in his arms. The walls pressed close on both sides. The stone steps twisted upward toward a small tower at the back of the church. Sisti walked ahead, and Luke kept his eyes fixed on her back the whole time. She started talking as if they were on some peaceful walk. She said she had wanted to meet him for a very long time. Nearly a year, in fact. Luke asked what that meant. Sisti explained that she had first noticed him when he was still adventuring beside Lily. At that time, Lily was already famous, a gifted sage. Sisti had been curious about Lily because she herself also used magic. But when she looked closer, she found something far stranger. The boy standing beside Lily had much more magic than Lily herself. Luke immediately denied it. That had to be wrong. Sisti said it was not wrong at all. She had checked more than once. Every single time, Luke's magic far surpassed Lily's. Lily had decent talent, but beside him, she looked small. Then she asked, why had someone with that much magic become a shield user? Luke had no answer. So Sisti explained something that should have been basic knowledge to any adventurer. Before joining the guild, people normally took an aptitude test. A special tool measured what kind of class suited them best. Once a class was fixed, a person's growth path was set. The skills and magic they would later develop depended on that class. It could never be changed. Luke stopped for a second. He had never taken an aptitude test either. Sisti found that almost funny. She said the answer was obvious. Someone had fixed his class without his knowledge. With the right tool, that part was possible. And with enough money, forged documents could get someone through guild registration as well. Luke remembered the day he joined. Lily had handled everything herself while he was kept waiting in a room at the inn and ordered not to leave. That was when it happened. His class had been chosen for him. For a few moments, rage nearly drowned everything else. Then Luke forced himself to breathe. He told Sisti that his life was still his. Being made a shield user had hurt him, yes. But that did not mean Lily had claimed his whole future. She had not owned what came next. Sisti called that stubbornly brave. Then she quietly added that she hoped he would still have a future after the trial. Luke asked again what God's trial actually was. Sisti said he would see soon enough. Then she asked whether he believed in God. Luke answered honestly that he did not believe in the God her church worshipped. Sisti said her God was not some invisible idea. Her God existed in plain sight, in a form no one could deny. Then she asked whether he knew what a demon king was. Luke did. A demon king was the name given to a rare monster that could gather and command many other monsters, sometimes across different species. It was not a title humans truly understood, only a name they used for a terrible kind of threat. If left alone, a demon king could turn whole regions into a disaster zone. When a demon king died, it left behind a single core, only one. The person judged to have dealt the greatest blow or earned the greatest merit received it. That core could then be forged into a unique weapon or tool, a demon king armament. They reached the top. The tower room was strange. One side was open to the outside, showing the wide plains beyond the capital. On the opposite side hung a huge red curtain that covered the whole wall. Sisti led Luke to the open side first. Then she walked to the curtain, untied the cords, and pulled it wide. Behind it stood a giant cannon, half sunk into the wall. It was nearly 2 meters tall. Its shape looked like a giant skull opening its mouth. Sisti presented it with pride. This, she said, was the Demon King armament called Death Turret Hecaton, and this was her god. Sisti began explaining at once. 70 years earlier, a demon king named Hecaton had appeared in the north and reduced town after town to ruin. Her uncle had been part of the force that killed it. He had landed the final decisive blow, which meant the core became his. Later, when he grew old and died, the weapon forged from that core passed to her. Luke listened in silence. He already knew one part. Demon King cores were never shared. There was only one, and only one person received it. Sisti stroked the cannon with a tenderness. Then she moved on to the trial itself. She said the preparation was simple. Luke only needed to kneel and be restrained. Her hands moved with frightening practice. Iron restraints snapped around his limbs in moments. She forced him down into place with smooth, practiced motions. Nearby, Piri still lay unconscious beside her father's pack. Luke looked at her and spoke quickly. He made Sisti promise again that Piri would be released, that Piri's mother would not be touched, and that the church would never drag Piri back inside after this. Sisti agreed to everything far too easily. That bothered Luke more than open resistance would have, so he asked the question that had been building inside him. If Sisti had wanted him so badly, why was she doing this instead of trying to recruit him? Her answer was blunt. Recruiting him had never been the main point. Making him undergo the trial had been the point from the start. Luke asked if she simply wanted him dead. She denied it with a smile. According to her, this was only a sacred test. Then she shifted the topic and asked whether he had heard the rumors about her miracle healing. Luke said yes. Sisti then explained the part no one else knew. Healing magic was not truly miraculous on its own. A normal healer could close wounds or ease ordinary damage, but curing an incurable illness should have been impossible. That kind of act required magic on a scale a human body could not normally hold. So, how had she done it? By borrowing Hecaton's power. Luke asked what that meant. Sisti explained another thing Luke had never been taught. Every person was born with an invisible organ that stored magic. It was called a mana furnace. Her own mana furnace had been linked to the cannon's power. Through that link, she could draw on the enormous magic stored inside Hecaton. That was how she had performed miracles. But the cannon did not only store huge amounts of magic, it could also fire all of that magic in one blast. All of it. Luke asked whether the weapon could control how much it fired. Sisti said no. Hecaton was all or nothing. If she emptied the cannon and the attack missed, then all that stored magic would be wasted. Her so-called miracles would vanish with it. But if the blast killed its target, then every bit of magic used in the shot returned to the cannon. And not just that, the target's own magic returned with it and was added to the total. At last, Luke understood the restraints. The target could never be allowed to dodge. He asked the question anyway. This was how they judged defectors, was it not? They shackled them down and fed them to the cannon. That was the moment Sisti's mask finally broke. The graceful saint vanished. She openly admitted it. People who wanted to leave the church were told to choose, let their families suffer, or face God's trial themselves. Many chose the trial. Hecaton then killed them, took their magic, and stayed full forever. She sounded proud of the system, proud that the cannon had never once failed to kill its target. Luke asked how many people had died like that. Sisti did not know, or did not care. To her, they were nothing but fuel. Luke looked at the cannon, then at the woman worshipping it, and felt sick. The so-called god of the Hybris church was just a killing machine that stole magic from the dead. That was all. Sisti mocked him then. She mocked the years he had spent under Lily's heel. She mocked the idea that someone like him could stop anything now. Luke only stared back with a face so cold that even she seemed amused by it. Then, the cannon came alive. A deep purple light began to gather inside the skull-shaped barrel. The pressure in the air turned suffocating. Sisti pressed herself against the cannon, like a worshipper embracing a holy relic. Her voice shook with wild excitement. Luke understood she had wanted him because of his magic. A boy with enormous hidden reserves was perfect fuel for her false god. The purple light reached its peak. Then the shot was fired. Luke's whole world vanished inside violet light, crushing sound, and violent impact. And then his consciousness snapped. A voice called for help. Then another followed it. Then many more. They all sounded desperate, sad, broken. Luke felt, with strange certainty, that he had to help them. When he opened his eyes, there was only darkness around him. Pale blue spheres floated through that darkness like drifting lanterns. A different voice came from each one. Some begged to be spared. Some asked for forgiveness. Luke reached for the nearest sphere. The moment his fingers touched it, the light melted into his palm and vanished inside him. He touched another, then another. Each time, the same strange feeling spread through him, warmth and loneliness, relief and grief. It all entered him together. At last, only one sphere remained. Luke reached for it. The moment he touched it, the dark world shattered. Then, another darkness took its place, the darkness behind his own eyelids. Luke opened his eyes to a pale blue sky and thin clouds drifting through slanted sunlight. He was lying on the ground. Pain ran through his whole body. His head hurt the most. It felt split open. The blast had finally done what no other attack had managed. He was hurt for real. Luke slowly stood up. Far away, he could see the silver leaf-shaped tower of the Hybris church rising over the city. That was enough to tell him what had happened. Hecaton had fired him out of the tower and thrown him all the way beyond the church grounds. Even so, he had survived. Luke looked down at his own hand, the dark place, the blue spheres, the crying voices. He could not prove it, but he felt certain those had been the final traces of the people Hecaton had killed. The cannon had devoured too many lives. That alone made one thing clear. That weapon should never have existed. Luke looked toward the church and started running. He ran across the grassland and straight into the chapel. The believers inside recoiled the moment they saw him. Some stared as if they had seen the dead return. When he burst into the upper room again, Sisti was still there. The moment she saw him alive, every bit of color left her face. She looked like she could not understand what she was seeing. Luke did not waste a second on her. He ignored her panic, gripped his shield, and walked straight toward the cannon. This time, there was no hesitation. He swung with everything he had. Shield bash crashed into Hecaton. The impact tore through the room like an explosion. The skull-shaped cannon shattered instantly. The thing Sisti had worshipped more than people, more than truth, and more than life itself was gone in a single strike. Sisti collapsed backward. Her false god had been destroyed in front of her eyes. Luke turned toward her. She was crawling away now. The pride was gone. The cruel smile was gone. Only fear remained. She deserved far worse than fear. She had built her power on blackmail, pain, and murder. She had chained people down, fed them to a weapon, and called it judgment. Luke stepped up to her. Sisti flinched. Then, instead of crushing her, he struck her once across the face. Just once. The sound cracked through the ruined tower. Sisti froze, one hand to her cheek, too shocked to react. Luke looked down at her and spoke with a coldness even he had never heard in his own voice before. Hecaton was gone. Her false miracles were gone. The weapon she hid behind was gone, but her followers were still here. Her church was still standing, and the people who believed in her were still trapped inside the world she had built. That meant she still had one chance left. she could decide what kind of leader she would be from now on, Luke warned her clearly. If he ever heard again that the Hybris Church was tormenting believers, cheating the guild, or crushing people with fear, then he would come back, and next time, he would not stop with one strike. Sisti could barely breathe. Then movement came from the side. Piri stirred. Luke's focus broke at once. He turned away from Sisti and rushed to Piri. Luke dropped to one knee beside her. Piri slowly opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was him. Then she noticed the injury. Her face changed immediately. The tears came almost at once. Luke tried to calm her the same way he always did. He told her he was fine. That only made her cry harder, because by then she knew that line too well. It was what he always said whenever he was the one hurting. Luke went quiet. Piri pushed herself up with shaking arms and grabbed his clothes. Luke gently held her shoulders so she would not fall. She looked at the injury on his head, at the broken tower, at the shattered cannon, and then back at him. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. The fear she had been holding in for too long finally broke loose all at once, so she cried. Luke said nothing. He only let her cry. After everything that had happened, words would have been too small anyway. Luke stayed beside her, while her crying went on and on.